Consuming a great piece of fiction should be a lot like going to the gym, meaning that by the end of it, you have exercised and strengthened some portion of your character, your aptitude, or your overall intellect. This work is an excellent way to strengthen your instincts for political freedom and work your muscles against fascism and authoritarianism, which I'd argue is urgent work for the world we live in today. V for Vendetta was written by Alan Moore and illustrated by David Lloyd and released between 1982 and 1989. You might already be familiar with the 2005 film adaptation starring Hugo Weaving and Natalie Portman, and it sounds like we're going to get a new HBO television series under James Gunn's DC Studios banner, which is part of what inspired me to reread this in the first place. And I say reread, but it had been so long that honestly half the content felt pretty new to me, especially the pieces that differed from how the movie portrays them. Look, this is an excellent work of fiction, and there's a reason that Moore is widely recognized as one of the greatest living comic book writers. You remember Watchmen? That's him. Batman the Killing Joke? Also Moore. From Hell? Moore as well. And I happen to think V for Vendetta is one of his best works. The story follows the titular V, a masked vigilante opposing a fascist, authoritarian British government set in an alternate history of the 90s after a nuclear war has devastated much of the globe. Every bad thing you think a fascist government might do has happened in this story. Cultural histories have been erased with a broad brush, and countless groups living on the margins of society have been excised entirely from the population. It is a bad, bad place to be. Even if more realistically sets up a scenario in which an otherwise good place could have gotten there. Now, the story moves along quickly, unraveling certain mysteries and demonstrating that some questions are better left unanswered, and half the fun comes from the character of V himself, whose mystery and savoir-faire are enhanced by a colorful vocabulary that leans heavily on alliteration and some of the best lines that Shakespeare has to offer. Now, I found the two major departures from the film striking, but for different reasons. Moore's an anarchist, and this book makes an argument for that politic, not just against fascism or authoritarianism. And that element stripped from the movie, which more succinctly strikes just an anti-authoritarian note. Also, a big feature in the comic is this supercomputer that the leader of the fascist government has kind of developed this obsessive relationship with. That doesn't feature in the movie at all, but it was kind of striking going back and rereading that portion, especially living in the age of AI. Look, ultimately, I think part of the reason Moore chose to set his fascist warning story about an authoritarian government in his home is to remind us that it can happen here, wherever here might be for you. Hatred, marginalization of the other, and authoritarianism are easy knee-jerk reactions in response to difficult times. But Moore reminds us that those short-term feel-good trade-offs they offer are never worth the false promises or the massive damages that are incurred by society in exchange. If you need a reminder of that and you don't feel like waiting for the television show, I really recommend you give V for Vendetta a read.